paper is an attachment. We have worked through and tweaked certain areas in order that we can then progress through with our overall aspiration. The copy of the document is presented at Appendix A. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee are aware of it. You have at E8 a forward from me outlining the fact that this keeps us in line with our vision of making the Isle of Wight an inspiring place to grow up, work, live and visit. A lot of the areas within the plan address some of our core principles, and then you'll find from E16 onwards that each area of the Cabinet work is highlighted and detailed by the respective Cabinet members so that people know exactly what we are doing and what we're aspiring to achieve. There are many achievements so far which may come out in the latter part of this meeting this evening. But as a principle, I present the corporate plan and would look for a seconder to my proposal, which is a recommendation at E4. And that recommendation is to approve the corporate plan as set out at Appendix A and recommend that it be adopted by full council, subject to any amendments which are proposed by Cabinet. And I'll look for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you. Does members wish to speak on that?
Any member wish to speak on this? Councillor P.C. Wilcox.
I was just going to ask on the regeneration and business of Councillor Wayne Whittle, if I can ask a question. It says here, continue to work with partners on the One Public Estates, including the Blue Light Hub Pile Street. My concern is Councillor Whittle here?
No.
Oh, maybe somebody else can answer then. I understand when I questioned in scrutiny about the fire service being transferred, I asked about the sites, and you said that the sites would be part of the deal. So, if we're to have a blue light system in Pyle Street, why did we give away the fire station, or why are we going to?
Councillor Stewart.
So thank you for the question. We probably need to separate the regeneration element from the fire service aspect. The properties that are currently under the wing of our fire service, which we are in partnership with Hampshire and delivering, some of those will transfer under the new arrangements, and I'll ask Councillor Outlaw to just highlight those key points in a moment. On the wider question of Pyle Street and actually beyond, there have been quite a few issues relating to our engagement with Homes England, who don't quite see the world as we do in certain areas at the moment. We do, however, have a bigger strategy which is coming under the title of One Public Service. We had a meeting on that today, and I'm pleased to report to Council that that is moving at pace now. We are engaging with our partners from health, from the voluntary sector, from the fire service, from the police service. You may be aware or may not that we now have a new director of communications who is shared jointly with ourselves and health. And everything is gearing up to that overall goal of providing an improved service on the island and probably a more cost-effective service by increasingly engaging in working together. Some examples I'll give. We now run the waste contract for the hospital. We have an emergency planning officer who's now engaged directly with the hospital. We are working with the hospital and other parts of the service now to look at the IT systems. And so that element that you talked about on the property side, which is the fire service, is part of that bigger picture. Did you want to just cover what's gone on?
Councillor
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All I would say is that all of the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Services fire stations will form part of the business case going forward to the Combined Fire Authority. But be absolutely clear that the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service will remain the Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, representing our community and keeping it safe. That doesn't stop the Isle of Wight Council from working with all of its blue light partners in the development of that site.
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans, if I could remind members, this is the debate. You've got 3 minutes each, and the leader will sum up at the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to say that the corporate plan, the way it's presented, is very clear. We can hold each cabinet member to account for what they've put forward that they're going to be achieving. And also the stats are very useful as well, so we can easily track and ask questions at our various committees, scrutiny and so on, and of course the public can ask questions too. So yeah, particularly pleased to see a few things in there. Obviously looking after our adult social care and children's well-being is very important to us all. And as is the collaboration and the partnership work. So it's good to see that the leader, you put that in there about building on the partnerships. And Councillor Ward, who've talked about working with businesses and communities when you're delivering the new parking strategy, which I think is excellent. And also about our sustainable transport. As you know, Newport has its People First Zone initiative going forward, so it's great to see that we've got some backing within the corporate plan for what we're doing locally. Just two things in the two stats do kind of concern me where we aren't doing brilliantly. One is the our education, so the work on page 24 and 30, the proportion of working age population qualified at NVQ level 2 or higher, and the baseline was 83% in 2015. Our 10-year target is 88%, and we're now on 74%. So our stats on that aren't looking great. And I think for our future, we need to really work on that. If you take that in alongside our gross weekly wage, which a baseline in 2015 was £492, we're looking in 3 years' time at £525, but now it's £480, actually gone down in the last 3 years. So I think these are really concerning stats, as is the stats that we get from the Housing Needs Survey that was done for the Island Plan, where it shows our working age population going down and our non-working age population going up. So we are heading for a crisis if we really don't address these particular issues. So I'm really glad that we've got a very clear plan, and I'm sure by achieving what's written down very clearly, we can turn this around for our island.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Councillor Burks, please.
Sorry, I wonder if I had a meeting over a year ago with Island Roads, three personnel from Island Roads, and we did a ward walkabout which took about an hour and a half, and we picked up numerous pathways, walkways, etc., that are not safe for people to walk along. Also, there were some of the roads which now cyclists avoid bent like the plague because they're totally dangerous for anybody on a push bike. We've had quite a few motorcycle accidents over there anyway. It's the roads and pathways and various other things. I wonder if I might, on the environment and heritage, ask Councillor Hobart if he would come with me on a site walkabout so that we can pick up these pointers again. There's one set of broken steps, and so there's 3 pathways that are impassable. But if Councillor Hobart can come out and walk around there with me, he might be able to get Island Roads to do something, which is what we're paying them to do.
Thank you, Councillor Burks. I'm sure Councillor Hobart will be happy to do that. If you can arrange to meet up together.
Could I, while I'm also on my feet, just ask Councillor Hutchinson, Ventnor Haven, which I've been harping on about for about 4 years, we've still had no future plans for it, except that the rumours keep going around that it's going to be sold off for £1. There's nothing been done about the fishermen's rights to what they can and can't do down there. All we keep hearing is that it's a loss maker and it should be making a profit if it was being managed properly, which is not. So could I have a meeting sometime with Councillor Hutchinson down there? Maybe he could work out where it was all going wrong down there. And it's not just the seaweed.
Councillor Burks, this is about the corporate plan.
Yeah.
Councillor Brodie, you're next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, in regard to the corporate plan, I mean, the corporate plan is, of course, absolutely essential for an opposition member. I mean, it's all that long list of hostages to fortune at the back that I quite like, that Julie's marked up 2, I've marked up about 30 you know, to keep an eye on over the next year and a half. And I mean, it's well laid out, so I am pleased with that. I'm not going to vote for it because there's elements of what you want to do I fundamentally don't agree with, but I'll watch the bits that do interest me, and Julie's highlighted issues around education. There are some adult social care things, some things around housing. There are a few typos in it, to be honest, you know, measures that are described as averages, which are actually whole numbers and stuff like that. I'm surprised haven't been picked up by proofreading. Can I just say one thing that, you know, and I'm going back quite a long way here, the Ireland Roads contract, which Councillor Perks referred to, you know, has now been in place for 6.5 years nearly. So we're not far from the end of the core investment programme. And I remember when in my second spell as chair of scrutiny back in 2013-14, asking then for performance measures for councillors to be able to review how that contract was going. And we never see them. I've never seen them anyway. They might exist, and I'm sure that the leadership of council see them. But scrutiny never sees them as far as I'm aware, because I have major concerns about Island roads, and I'll say it now, I call them Island rogues now. Can you tell the difference in my accent there? Island rogues, G-U-E-S. Because I have absolutely no faith in Ireland roads, and I have absolutely no faith, Ian, that the core investment programme will be delivered in my town or in my ward. I've recently done an audit of the number of roads that are unsurfaced in Newport East and in yours, Matt. The Belcroft estate is a disgrace, and you actually had Mayfield Drive done right at the start of it, and it needs doing again. Is it? All right, well, fair enough. I didn't know that. But, you know, in the county town that the leader of the council talked about being the centre of the universe and everything, which it is my centre of the universe, you know, the state of our roads, they're disgraceful in your ward as well, aren't they, Julie? Do you really think that Island rogues are going to deliver on the core investment programme, i.e. by the end of March? Because I have been asking this on a pretty much a 6-monthly basis. I'm assured constantly. It's not more than 8 months to go now, and I don't believe it will happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brodie, I meet with the head of Island Roads regularly, and of course this is obviously one of the discussion points on how we're doing. I think most people know it, but just to reinforce the point, the core investment period is not about resurfacing every road on the island in the 7 years that's there. It is to make sure that the roads are at a given standard of quality at the end of that period. Now, you might be, that particular bit of road might be at the end of its life after 8 years, so you've got a year left. We have recently rechecked, actually, the quality standards and that Island Roads are using, able to verify, if that's the word I'm using, verify that they are using the right standards, okay? If you give me your road details, I will check on them. Your point about statistics and performance figures, I will get you some.
Okay. Councillor Ward. Councillor Garrett, do you wish to debate the corporate plan?
Thank you, Chair. So I too am going to refer to the PFI contract. The first thing I'm going to note that the then scrutiny committee on, I believe it was the 7th of March, Chief Executive did give a commitment to bringing a report on the highway PFI contract and associated issues to our meeting of what is now corporate scrutiny on October the 2009. So there will be plenty to get our teeth into, I hope, then. One thing a statistic that we will be wanting to have is just how many of the monitoring lengths, as I understand they're called, have had to see remedial works and on what timescale. I think in particular in my own ward of Note Common Road, with long, extensive longitudinal cracks to the depth of about 30 centimetres in places. I see the same things around the country, around the county, of course. And you can see them because they look like these long ribbons of black where they've been filled in. So that suggests something that perhaps is missing from the corporate plan, which extends beyond the core period investment, is how the corporate plan builds in that
measurement and monitoring of the contract thereafter to make sure that we don't return our roads to the awful condition that they very much used to be, and pretty much always were since I was growing up. So once again, an advertisement for anybody who has particular concerns about the way in which the PFI contract has been delivered. If they want something that corporate scrutiny should particularly pick up, then I'd be very pleased to hear from them as chair of that committee.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Barry, wish to speak?
No, that's all right. It's going to end up about Island Roads all the time. I mean, I'm glad to hear that Councillor Price is getting one of his roads done twice. Seaview's still waiting.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens, please.
It's my turn. Thank you. I understand about the PFI and the Island Roads contract, etc., but there's other things that we actually put out to contract. I just want to say this is well laid out. That's great, and it's very, very readable, may I add, as well. But I'm concerned with regard. I hear that the PFI contract might be reviewed at scrutiny, and within this chamber, it's not to you, leader, but it's to possibly the chair of scrutiny. Shouldn't we be doing more to, if you like, bring in line those contracts which are causing us concern, such as those pushed out to the Salvation Army on homelessness and on support for people in need, and see if we're getting, one, the support out there, two, are we getting value for money? Because I noted earlier about the closure of day centres, etc., and once again we'll be putting out contracts, no doubt. We want to be assured that those contracts are monitored, we get value for money, the cost of those contracts don't actually go above the budget line that was mentioned earlier for last year's budget. We need to make sure that if there's going to be savings, there's going to be savings. We want to make sure that those savings have got to actually support people in need. And that's all I want to say, is that bring it back to corporate scrutiny or whatever. I don't often participate, which is a little bit of a shame, but make sure that we scrutinise what we should be scrutinising, and make sure that we get value for money for this council and the residents of the Isle of Wight, and the support that the residents of the Isle of Wight need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Nobody else wish to speak? Leader wish to sum up, please.
Well, thank you, members, for all the comments. Start with Councillor G. Jones-Evans. The MVQ stats noted, they are in there, and obviously that's a good example of now we can monitor them, but I think you pick up a fair report comment there, so thank you for that. Whilst it's not for me to say, but I have no doubt whatsoever that the ward walks requested by various people, particularly Councillor Perks, I'm sure Councillor Hobart will be happy to do that, and probably take Councillor Ward with him since it's his brief. Councillor Hutchinson, I know, will be able to give you some details on Ventnor Haven. I was present at a meeting today with the Mayor of Ventnor when we discussed the future of Ventnor Haven and what the options were. What we're trying to do, in the same way as we have at Ryde, is make sure we're fully briefed on what the local community wants to do, as well as take a commercial approach to these assets. So I'm sure outside this meeting, Councillor Hutchinson would probably want you to be involved in that kind of work, because we've got all sorts of things underway. Councillor Rhodey, I thought I had I don't think I did now. I thought I said you say Island Rogues, and then I thought that's probably what he did say, actually. So Freudian slips, always interesting. I'll keep that one in my mind. You're right, there are important needs for performance measures. I know you've been quite open. You don't support the principle of the Island Roads contract. I do. Yep. Okay, well, thank you for that clarity, and I'll try and remember that. What I can say, and I can absolutely support Councillor Ward in this, we have had a number of very significant meetings with very senior management in Island Roads, because this is absolutely an important area for us, not only about the savings which we've had to make, and I always remind people we've got to balance the books, otherwise the rest is just academic in any area. But also because we are keen to see high performance in the areas you've quoted, and Councillor Ward, whilst he can't go beyond what he said, I can echo that we've covered that very thoroughly. There is some other good things coming down the line on that. Councillor Stevens, related to homelessness and our link with the Salvation Army, I'm actually quite pleased that we managed to, I was going to say nick, but that's the wrong word for me, acquire the services of a former Salvation Army person who now works for this council, because his expertise has been outstanding. Obviously, in all areas, value for money is a priority. And I can only say that the more we move towards one public service on this island, and I would include in that the voluntary sector, and I would include in that the people we set up contracts with, the better service we'll provide with the limited money we've got. As I said to you at the start, Mr. Morris hasn't rung me yet to confirm the cheques in the post, although he said he would support us. You can be in no doubt. I will be asking him if he'll do what he said. Because at the end of the day, even we would accept that it is a challenge. We've saved an awful lot of money on this island, and there's only so much you can do. So on that basis, I hope members will be happy with the corporate plan in principle, and will be able to support the recommendation, which is that we approve the corporate plan as set out in Appendix A and recommend its adoption by full council, subject to any amendments proposed by Cabinet. And I ask that goes to the vote.
Thank you, Leader. It's been proposed, seconded by Councillor Ashton, to approve the corporate plan as set out in Appendix A. Those in favour of that recommendation, raise your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
None of our
6, 7, 8, 9.
Those against? And any abstentions? Three. Abstentions again? We've got 22 for, 8 against and 6 abstentions. The recommendation is carried. We're going to item 6.
Item 9.
Item 9. I got it wrong here, haven't I? Motions submitted on the procedure rule 9 of the Council's Constitution. Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you for allowing me to raise a point of order, Mr. Chairman, because I think it's important for consistency that I do so. The previous chair was asked to rule on whether my interpretation of the constitutional rules was correct. She ruled that I was correct, having taken advice from the monitoring officer, who was heard to say at the meeting, he's correct. The point that I want to raise in relation to the next motion is that the constitution of the council quite clearly makes all these matters responsibilities for the leader, the cabinet, and the responsible members. This motion that will follow mine is out of order completely because it is unconstitutional. That matters because our constitution is part of the law. This council cannot do anything that is not provided for by the constitution, and it must conform with the constitution. If it does not, then you are acting unlawfully, and any officer who encourages you is acting unlawfully. All these points that are to follow my simple motion on the Local Government Act 2000 are unlawful unless the Constitution is first amended. We had this debate under the last chair. The monitoring officer agreed and was heard by the full meeting to do so. It is also not appropriate for the monitoring officer to give advice in the middle of a council meeting on how to circumvent the constitutional objection that I raised last time. That too is unlawful because it is not consistent with our constitution. This motion, and I'm not commenting on the content of it, other than that he's making instructions and policy decisions, should have been stopped at the point of being tabled and advice given to the member at that point, not this evening, at that point, as to how these points could be raised constitutionally. To allow this debate to proceed on that motion is unlawful, Chair, and you'll be held responsible for it. Thank you. For the record, I move that don't move my motion, I carry it over to the next full council.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Would there be a seconder for that? No, no seconder. We moved it. Withdrawn it. Do we go on? We go on to the next one.
Sorry, on the assumption that we are progressing, can I just mention that certainly I'm aware that on the motion by Councillor Lilly, the one in my name, there are likely to be amendments. I have not seen any amendments. Nothing has been circulated, either electronically or by paper, and therefore it's difficult for us to make decisions about those amendments. This is another example of something I've been grumbling about for a long time, about the administration of full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brody. Councillor Lilly, would you like to?
Chair, could you give a ruling on the point of order that I raised, having taken advice from the monitoring officer, and if her advice is different from last time, could we have an explanation as to why that is?
We'll ask our monitoring officer to respond to you, Councillor Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. The motions that follow Councillor Whitehouse's motion are, so far as I'm concerned, or have been received properly by the councillor's motions. They are set out on the agenda, so you have notice of the motions, and they are, so far as I'm concerned, lawful motions, motions that this council can consider and debate and do with as it pleases.
Could we take this up outside this meeting, Councillor Whitehouse?
I'm sorry, but I disagree with Councillor Whitehouse. These motions are not unlawful. And I don't understand his reference to a previous comment I may have made, but all I can say to you, members, is that you are able to debate these. These are not unlawful. And whether or not carrying out some of these functions are executive functions and therefore functions for the Cabinet is a separate issue. But you can, as a council, debate and determine these. And, as I say, deal with them as you choose. I don't recall, or I'm not aware of the specifics to which you're referring, other than the fact that you've indicated that I made a comment that I said that's correct. I don't know the details. But all I can repeat is that these motions are motions that you can lawfully debate and you have the power to determine.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Whitehouse. Will to continue? Councillor Berry, your point of order.
I don't want to prolong this, but am I the only one sitting here who don't know what the hell he's on about?
Okay, thanks. Councillor Lilly, would you like to put your motion forward, please? Thank you.
Councillor Brodie, there are some amendments. I think we haven't circulated them at this stage until the amendments are put, in case it caused some confusion, lots of bits of paper for us to share around. But as motions are put, if amendments are put, we have copies and we will circulate them, and then the chairman will ensure that you're given sufficient time to read them before we proceed.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly, put forward your motion, please.
Thank you. The motion in front of you was for the May meeting. Due to the European elections, it was put to this meeting. July is on track to become one of the Earth's hottest months on record. We're obviously quite hot tonight. This is the real evidence that the planet's overall climate is warming, and that this extreme heat wave is more and more likely in the future unless we start taking action today. 171 unitary county and district councils in England have acted constitutionally and have signed up, i.e. passed motions to a climate emergency. And the UK Parliament has done so. A significant number are Conservative administrations. And I would like to point out to my erstwhile colleagues over there that their colleagues in Surrey, Gloucestershire, Kent, Dorset, Hertfordshire, Leicestershire, Shropshire, Suffolk, West Sussex and Northamptonshire have all unanimously voted for the kind of wording that is in front of you in this motion. They have agreed with their Labour colleagues, their Liberal colleagues, their Green colleagues, their Independent colleagues, that there is a need for their local authorities to take action. In fact, the Local Government Association has now a significant grouping of member authorities that's declared an emergency and want action. This Isle of Wight motion is to become 172 and to be able to be a force within the LGA in to actually get change with the new administration and the new government. The Isle of Wight on the 19th of June became a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve. That means we join places like the Serengeti, Ayers Rock, Gobi Desert, of actually having communities which are living side by side their environment. Thankfully, for the vast majority of people, there is no longer any debate about whether the climate is changing and whether or not mankind has been the driving force behind the unprecedented rate of change. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 1.5C report published in October 2018, humanity has 12 years for ambitious action for national and subnational authorities, civil societies, local authorities, the private sector, indigenous peoples and local communities to deliver the rapid and far-reaching transitions in land, energy, industry, buildings, transport and cities needed to turn this around so we can avoid reaching tipping points where no longer have the ability to avoid extreme weather events. I think the question is, if we think it's extreme hot at the moment, I think the question is, if we don't do something, it's going to get hotter. It is vital for all communities to play their part in reducing carbon emissions, especially as those are potential benefits for land use. Both of these facts have now changed. In the recent months. There has been a long overdue sea change in the public profile of climate change. And people that have been opposed and in denial about it are now changing. And we have to thank people like Greta Thunberg, for actually standing outside and actually campaigning that. We also need to thank our beloved national treasure, David Attenborough, who in fact my grandmother was his cleaner, whose recent programme, Climate Change, the facts, has had 1 million transfixed. The Isle of Wight is in a strong position to lead on carbon due to the absence of heavy industry, airports and motorways. The island already has relatively low emissions.
Thank you, Councillor
By
Lee.
supporting this motion, we will go further.
You have a
Thank
seconder, please, Councillor Lee. Councillor Brody. Seconded. Thank you. Member. Councillor Hastings.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, you have an amendment that I have tabled for this motion, which needs to be distributed.
Could we just distribute the amendment,
Yes, please.
Thank you. Give us a chance. Thank you. Give you a few minutes to read the motion, the amendment to the motion. Needs to be. Councillor Hastings, have you got a seconder for your amendment?
Yes, Chairman, I do, and whichever one you want to choose, Frank.
Councillor Mosdale. Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
I feel it's important for the amendment to be read out because it is of interest to those in the gallery. So it'd be good if it could just be read out. Thank you.
They just have copies.
Just been taken off.
Okay, Councillor Lilly. Sorry. Councillor Love. Councillor Hastings, would you like to start reading your amendment, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Climate emergency motion. To move that in the light of scientific reports relating to the world's climate, the Isle of Wight Council, in keeping with its long-standing tradition, will continue to take all reasonable steps to minimise its environmental impact and to maintain the beauty of our island. And on that basis, that this Council resolves to declare and acknowledge a climate emergency, aim to achieve net zero carbon emissions on the island by 2030, require the Chair of Policy and Scrutiny Committee for Neighbourhoods and Regeneration, in liaison with the Cabinet Member for Environment and Heritage, to establish a task and finish group to report back to the committee within 6 months with costed action plan recommending how the Council could work with partners and central government to ensure that the island's net carbon emissions can be reduced to zero by 2030. Present an annual update to the Isle of Wight Council on progress towards achieving net zero carbon emissions in line with the Isle of Wight Council's support for our UNESCO biosphere status. Develop and implement a community engagement plan via the Isle of Wight Council's Environment and Sustainability Forum, formerly the Community Plastic Forum, to mobilise environmental action groups, parish councils, biodiversity experts and residents in support of delivery of the action plan. Liaise with other local authorities that have declared a climate emergency through the Local Government Association to lobby government for additional powers and funding to help local authorities respond to the climate emergency. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hastings. Councillor Lilly.
I'm willing to accept the amendment because I think it's important that we actually get support across the council so that we actually are able to pass this tonight. I feel that most of the points in my proposal are covered in this, and I do know and thank Councillor Steve Hastings for trying to persuade his colleagues.
Councillor Lilly, you accept the amendment. Would your seconder be happy with that?
If you don't mind, I will second accepting it, but I would just like to express regret that points 5 and 6, essentially, from Councillor Lilly's motion have been omitted. That's the ones relating to establishing a climate change board, which would have demonstrated a serious commitment in many ways. But secondly, number 6, to write to the government requesting additional powers has been omitted as well. I think that's quite disappointing. But I think Councillor Lilly is absolutely right. It's best to get some level of commitment to declaring a climate emergency, and therefore, along with him, I will. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. Any member wish to speak?
I'd like to propose an amendment, if I may, Chair.
Councillor Whitehouse.
My amendment, now speaking to the note that's just been circled, which I assume is now the substantive motion before us, I would like to delete everything after the end of the first paragraph, so that the motion simply reads, to move that in the light of scientific reports relating to the world's climate, the Isle of Wight Council, in keeping with its long-standing tradition, will continue to make all reasonable steps to minimise its environmental impact and to maintain the beauty of our island. The reason I want to move this motion as an amendment is because it contains that which is within the control of this council and doesn't start declaring on science which we are not competent or qualified to comment on. This, you always heckle people with mental health problems. Could you defend my rights, Chair, and have them expelled if they continue?
No comments from the gallery, please.
The motion would then be, coincidentally, as the one I put in to the last council meeting, which was, without my permission, deleted by the monitoring officer from the agenda for today's meeting, even though it had been properly procedurally submitted and accepted as such at the time in writing. But leaving things as I have proposed they be left it would pledge this council, in keeping with its long-standing tradition, to continue to take, let me stress these next words, all reasonable steps. The rest of the motion is therefore redundant, because it is all covered by all reasonable steps to minimise its environmental impact. Or do members actually want to argue that we should take unreasonable steps, or that we shouldn't minimise our environmental impact, because everything else on this paper actually withdraws and undermines from that principle? It's one of the worst motions that I've ever seen, not least because the very definition of a motion in English language, and I've checked Erskine May, the world's greatest procedural expert on this, is that a motion can only be one single sentence, because it has to start, "I beg to move." And when you reach to a full stop, you then need to say, "I wish further to move," and therefore it becomes a second motion. We've had this raised before. This is not a motion. This is about 10 different motions, and our constitution is quite clear that a member may only introduce one motion now. Indeed, my second motion was arbitrarily and unilaterally removed from the agenda. So I'd be grateful if somebody with sanity and common sense would second my amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Seconder. Councillor Ward? Any member wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Councillor Pease.
I fully support Councillor Whitehouse's motion. I think it is sensible. It is in the realms of possibility and not, fantasy. As I say, I fully support it, and I fully support the motive behind it, because we can actually do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pease, please.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo the comments previously made. I fully support your motion. I think it's achievable and we can actually do it.
Thank you. Councillor Whitehouse, your microphone's on.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Julia Evans.
Though I understand where Councillor Whitehouse is coming from, and simplicity is always best in these matters, but we need to acknowledge and declare a climate emergency, in my view, as was done at the recent LGA conference, and it was everyone overwhelmingly supported. So the LGA have acknowledged this, so why can't we?
Thank you. Any other member wish to speak? Councillor Brody, thank you.
Yeah, well, to refer to quite a long time in this council, not as long as some people be around me, I think the arguments that Councillor Whitehouse has articulated, whilst in many ways, are logical, and frankly I'd rather see shorter motions, and I've been guilty of longer ones. But you could actually look back at every council agenda, every council meeting I've attended over the last 14 years, and I think I've only missed 3. I've just never missed any. We've had motions longer than this. It's, I'm not saying that, that just because we've always done it, we should keep doing it. But I think this constant attempt by Councillor Whitehouse to undermine the way in which people try and bring important issues to the attention of the Chamber, but also to the attention of the island for whomever's listening to us, and I sometimes wonder, is quite worrying. Steve Hastings sat over there, Councillor Whitehouse. They're both Chris is a Newport Art Councillor, Steve's on Newport Parish Council with me. Steve has, with goodwill, worked with Councillor Lilly on this proposal and has come up with a form of wording that I think Councillor Whitehouse described as the worst motion he'd ever seen, because that's what the amendment is. The amendment is Steve's words, not Michael's. And he's criticising Steve Hastings, who's a cabinet member, by the way, just to mention that. I would hope, and I saw that the hands go up seconding Councillor Whitehouse's amendment, and I understand some of the element of that. I think there'll be some climate sceptics around that as well. I've no doubt about it. But there were some people who will just be fed up with these long motions. I'd like to say let's draw a line on this, really, because, you know, I mean, I would ask you to reject this amendment, deal with the climate emergency thing, deal with what's on your agenda tonight. I know they're all from opposition members, except Councillor Whitehouse's bi-monthly succinct one-line motion. And let's all people who are going to submit motions in the future think about being succinct in the future, about trying to propose single-line motions and putting the meat on the bone through what they say rather than what they write. Because a lot of the time, we're putting a speech in here as part of the wording, and then Michael's got 2 pages of stuff to listen to there, and I've spoken over the time. But anyway, that's just an urge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. I must remind members we have only got an hour to discuss all motions on the agenda. We're halfway through that. Can I bring in leader, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to Councillor Whitehouse for explaining his motion, and particularly the words all reasonable steps, because as he said, logically that covers all reasonable steps, which probably then does cover all the 1 to 6 bullets in the amendment. So I could quite happily support that amendment. But if that amendment falls, then I'll wait to hear the debate on the what is now the motion, actually. I think I've got that right. Before I decide where I'll go with that. So that's my rationale.
Councillor Hastings.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, I'd just like to point out that this motion would have been a lot shorter, at least a paragraph shorter, if not for the good grace that I allowed Councillor Whitehouse's words to appear at the front of it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Just in brief, I would like to commend Councillor Lilly and Councillor Hastings for actually working together to come up with, albeit a slightly watered down version, but something that actually still keeps the true essence of the original motion. Councillor Whitehouse has, I feel, ridden roughshod completely over the whole lot, and the essence of it is lost. So I cannot support the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Love.
Thank you. I appreciate many of the things that have been said in here, and unfortunately I cannot support Councillor Whitehouse's amendment because I believe that we are in an emergency climate situation now, and we need to try to reach beyond what is reasonably within the powers of this council. We need to reach beyond that, because if we do not reach beyond that, then, you know, what kind of a world are we going to be living in? So, with regret, I cannot support Councillor Whitehouse's amendment. We need to bring forward the essence of what has been presented by Councillor Lilly and stretch ourselves as a council to the limits of our power and beyond if we can.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
I would urge members to vote against this amendment of the amendment, very much on the principle that the motion, the amendment as presented by Councillor Hastings and my original motion are in line with the wording of actually many of the 171 motions, including a substantial amount of Conservative motions within that. And I think that it's important that we stand together through the local within this particular way. The wording in the in Councillor Whitehouse amendment doesn't really say anything and doesn't actually give us unity with the growing movement across this country.
Thank you. We need to put that to the vote. We're out of time on this one. They vote. This is Councillor Whitehouse's. In favour of Councillor Whitehouse's motion, amendment. Yep.
Councillor
Abraham, Councillor Brading, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Peace, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whitehouse, Councillor Perks and Councillor Stewart.
Those against?
Councillor Axford, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Henry, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Andre, Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howell, Councillor Medland, Councillor PC Wilcox, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Smart and Councillor Cameron.
And those abstentions? Any abstentions on this one?
Councillor Beston.
Councillor Beston, thank you. We've got 12 for, 23 against and 1 abstention. 23 against, 1 abstention. So the amendment falls. And we go to the substantive motive, which became the substantive motive by Councillor Hastings.
Does the Constitution allow a member to move a second motion, amendment?
Yes? Those members for Councillor Hastings.
No, we've got debate.
Oh, we've got debate.
Sorry.
Second.
Chairman, would you like me to say a few words about the worst motion ever brought to this chamber?
Could you?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to move another amendment. I have quite a few this evening, as you might imagine, because I didn't expect that first one to succeed. I would therefore like to propose that we delete the line that is numbered number 1, declare and acknowledge a climate emergency, because this council is not competent to assess whether there's a climate emergency. I personally happen to believe there probably is. But I also know that I'm not competent to join with the International Committee on Climate Change and to say that we've got 18 years or whatever the figure was that was quoted earlier. 2. Well, just wait till I finish my amendments. You're going to be very old and running out of time. How long do I get to speak on an amendment?
5 minutes, Councillor.
5 minutes. Okay, I'm going to need at least 10 then, aren't I?
Point of order, Chair. I'm really sorry, but
I have been called to speak, Chair, and I will not be interrupted.
Standing amendment as put forward by Councillor Lilly.
We're dealing with amendment at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. Could I have some extra time added on because of all these interruptions that you're letting happen? I wanted to
comment from the gallery, please.
I wanted to say that actually my commitment to the Green cause has been lifelong. It was me who arranged the anniversary party in Parliament for the passing of the Climate Change Act on the day that it got royal assent. And I was a member of the Green Party before anybody in this room was. But I grew up and I realised that bandying cheap slogans about climate change and coming forward with large motions to local authorities to use them as a platform for cheap publicity to promote the income of pressure groups is not the role of a local council. We should not be doing it. The original amendment that I proposed was perfectly good in allowing anything to be decided by Cabinet and giving it a clear instruction to do all in its power to minimise its environmental impact. So if we can't have a sensible motion, let's at least take the extreme silliness of a bunch of largely elderly people without a scientific background and no expertise whatsoever on the subject, trying to assess what the great scientific community of the world is still in debate about, which is whether climate change is happening.
Quiet from the gallery, please.
To assess whether climate change is happening, and if so, the speed at which it's happening, and whether, and if so, whether mankind's impact upon that is what is causing it. Now, I personally, as I happen to say, believe all those things. I believe the evidence does point to it. I believe there is an urgency about it. And I believe it is about mankind's impact on the environment. But I'm also not an idiot enough to think that I have that evidence. That's why I work so closely with the Committee on Climate Change to celebrate the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of the passing of their Act, and arranged meetings for its chair with visiting dignitaries from overseas so that he could try and spread the model of his legislation to other countries. So nobody in this room can even come close to matching my environmental credentials. But what I won't do is put my vote to a stupid slogan passed by a bunch of lay people who genuinely don't know what they're talking about. Thank you, Chair. I do have some more amendments in due course.
Thank you, Chris. We need a seconder for your motion, please. Councillor Pease. We need somebody who wishes to speak. Councillor Julie Jones-Evans.
So I put my hand up before Councillor Whitehouse just yelled across the chamber asking if he could put a second motion, because following our constitution and the rules of engagement in this chamber, which I've been sat here for 10 years following, I was going to suggest that we move, or ask that we can move straight to the vote on the substantive motion, which has now been accepted, as Councillor Lilly and Councillor Hastings have worked on that amendment. That's what we should be doing, not allowing any more amendments, because we have business, important business. People work very hard on putting motions forward. We're not going to get through them. It's clear cut as far as I'm concerned. I will not take part any more of Councillor Whitehouse's ridiculous motion.
Thank you. Can I bring the leader in, please?
Chair, mindful that we were speaking to the amendment, I have kept back my comments that I wish to make about the motion. If we move straight to the vote, I will feel that I've been very disadvantaged on my decision. Therefore, I can't support us moving straight to the vote, and I hope that we won't do that. I think there are members in this chamber who may want to speak on the main motion, and they're entitled to do that. It is Councillor Whitehouse's right to make amendments. If he gets seconded, so be it. That is the process of our constitution, but I don't think we should move to the vote to try and stifle debate.
We are debating the motion, which is the first bullet point, declare and acknowledge a climate emergency, and the proposal is to remove that by Councillor Whitehouse. Any other member wish to speak on that? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite rightly, if people want to debate an amendment or a motion, they should be allowed to. Just skipping and moving things on to highlight the inadequacy or the inefficiency of our system is not the way forward. I just want to mention the way that Councillor Whitehouse is putting forward his amendments, that I haven't seen a copy of the amendments yet, and I assumed that that's the way that we worked in this chamber. Everyone could receive a written amendment, and that hasn't followed the procedure. So, having said that, I'd like to move on to the vote. Thank you.
Any other member wish to speak on Councillor Whitehouse's amendment? And that is to remove the first bullet point. Councillor Archerson.
Thank you, Chairman. I try to stay quiet on this, and I will freely admit that I'm a climate sceptic. I'm a climate sceptic because I've spent many years studying the issue.
And at one time I thought it was a genuine reason that mankind was actually affecting the climate. I now think that's fairly unlikely. But I also look at what previous predictions have been. The United Nations Environmental Programme, which was the precursor to the IPCC, who issued the latest 12-year forecast, originally predicted an environmental catastrophe by the year 2000. They did that in 1982. Al Gore, who was a convinced environmentalist, produced a film called An Inconvenient Truth. Some of you may have seen that. And in that, he confidently predicted we had just 10 years to save the planet. That was in 2006. Even Prince Charles, a committed environmentalist, took huge amounts of evidence from professional advisors and announced that we had 100 months to make changes to save the planet. That was in 2009. Since that's proved wrong, he's changed the date to 2050. If you want to go back a bit further to the first World Earth Day in 1970, we were told to expect up to 11 degrees of global cooling by 2000. And at that same summit, they confidently predicted that by 2000, 30 years from then, the entire world, with the exception of Western Europe, North America and Australia, would be in famine. We have just declared our largest grain harvest ever. So there have been lots of Earth Days since, all with equally flawed predictions. I think it is true that the climate is changing. It probably is changing to become warmer because we are moving out of an ice age. We ought to be doing something to mitigate that change, not trying to stop it, when the only tool we have to stop it is to change the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. That was 380 parts per million. It's gone up to just over 400 parts per million. And when the dinosaurs were roaming on Sundown Beach, it was about 2,000 parts per million. So I shall be voting against the motions for climate change.
Thank you, Councillor Large.
Thank you. We're talking to the amendment which has been made by Councillor Whitehouse, and I'm so pleased that we've got at least one person who says that he knows something about climate change, even if I don't necessarily agree with what you're saying. It does us no harm as a council whatsoever for voting for an emergency, to declare a climate emergency. It does us no harm whatsoever. In fact, we are a biosphere. For us not to support that as a biosphere damages our reputation as a council. We should be supporting anything which brings our council into focus across the United Kingdom and the world. So what is the harm in voting for something which is only beneficial to our environment, isn't it? No matter what, whether if you believe in a climate emergency or not, by voting for and declaring a climate emergency, we are moving this council forward. We're not standing still or sitting on the line, or sitting on the fence. So what is wrong with making sure that that is declared within our response?
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Churchman.
I can't resist it. I've sat here listening to all the bureaucratic words and things, and I wonder at the end of the day how much effect it will be. Could I say to everybody here, I use soda to clean, bicarbonate soda to clean my kitchen. I use vinegar to get rid of things like deposits, lime deposits. I think the only spray I have in my house is a hairspray. This has got to be an individual thing. You can't start making plans and saying to people, oh, we're going to save the planet. It's got to be individual. Every one of us. Tumble dryers. How many of you use tumble dryers? One of the most expensive forms of electricity there is. How many of you have and lay concrete? The most expensive use of electricity, etc., known to man is making cement. We need individually to look at what we do. Every time you wash up, you pour washing up liquid into the ground. Where on earth do you think it goes? It doesn't go anywhere except into the ground. Think of the food you eat, the wrappers that people throw away. So please, folks, don't just think in terms of, oh, climate emergency. It's here and now, and individually we can make such a difference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pease.
Thank you, Chair. I've supported or seconded Councillor Whitehouse's amendment to remove number one. Number one is just a catchy slogan. It's nothing more. It's just something that sounds dramatic to get effect. It's nothing but symbolic. And I don't actually agree with voting for something just because of some symbolism that might please a few protesters. The other thing about this is that we can't actually do anything about this. We can declare a climate emergency, but it makes no blooming difference whatsoever. The only people that can change this and affect this are national governments and international bodies, not a local council. That's why I've supported Councillor Whitehouse's motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no doubt that the climate is changing. I work in the countryside for a living. I see trees that used to, oak trees that used to come into bloom in May, now in April. And the oak trees will still be in full leaf until well into November. So things are going on that we don't understand. My concern is that with just talking about a climate emergency, is that we are missing the point that actually Tanya Rebel said this morning, this afternoon, is that we need to protect our environment more than we actually do. And I don't think that just declaring a climate emergency is anything more than virtue signalling. I don't think it actually deals with what the actual issues are. When the government have talked about going over to electric vehicles and doing away with petrol and with diesel vehicles, you know, nobody ever talks about where the electric for those vehicles is actually going to come from. I think we need to know what that actually is, what the impact of that is going to be. We don't know if we've got enough cobalt in the world. And in the wee small hours the other night, I was listening to a programme on the World Service where they're actually going down into the depths of the ocean to try and see if they can start to mine cobalt for batteries. And I think those are the issues that I would like to see actually tackled by central government. I don't want to see the Central Africa ripped up and no controls over it, because they can actually, you know, it helps them get money to make batteries. You know, it is stuff that is coming to us. And then when we're talking about some of the crops that we can grow to stop keeping cattle, a lot of the crops that they're talking about we couldn't grow in this country, not because it's able to grow them here, it's because they're actually, it's too cold to grow some of the crops here. So I just think it doesn't go into enough depth, and I fully support some of the things that Councillor Hutchinson has already said, that we need to understand it more. I don't think we know all about it, but my main concern is for our environment, what we're doing to it as a human race. But I will say, a man with a full belly, a look at the world far different than a man with an empty one.
Thank you. I've got one more, then we go to the vote on this. Councillor Perks.
Given that with a bit of luck we'll still be sitting here in 70, 80 years' time, or our children might be, and we'll still be talking about the same things as we are tonight, because the world's not going to finish tomorrow. I would like to propose that we go, we've all spoken about it for half an hour or whatever, that why don't we just declare and acknowledge a climate emergency, and that's it.
We have to deal with this amendment first, Councillor Perks. So, if we do yours, do Councillor Whitehouse's first. We can finish that off. The motion is to delete the first paragraph, which says declare and acknowledge a climate emergency. Those four.
Am I entitled to
amendment.
respond to that very constructive debate? No, I didn't think we were, but that's another 20 seconds.
Amendment. Those four, Councillor Whitehouse's amendment. Just raise your hands, the ones who support Councillor Whitehouse.
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Peace, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Ward, Councillor Whitehouse. That's it.
Those against?
Councillor Axford, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Henry, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Mosdell, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Andre, Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Medland, Councillor P.C. Wilcox, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Smart, and Councillor Cameron.
Any abstentions?
Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Perks, and Councillor Stewart.
Thank you.
Councillor Hastings had his arm up. I'm not sure what for.
Do you wish to speak, Councillor Hastings?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was just hoping to get in before anybody else to ask that perhaps now we've had that bit of discussion and bit of fun, perhaps we could move to the vote.
Could we just get the result of this one first, please?
Yes.
On a point of order, while you're doing that, I think we do need to hear from the Leader of the Council before we move to anywhere near a vote.
Those for, 8, against 23, and 4 abstentions.
Can you say it again?
8 for, 23 against, and 4 abstentions.
How much time, Jim? 5 minutes left.
We've got 5 minutes left for any motions.
I didn't quite hear what Steve said, but just in case he didn't, can I propose that we move to the vote on a substantive motion as amended by Councillor Hastings? Thank you. I'll look for a second.
I second it.
Second by Councillor Lilly.
Chairman, it's for you to consider if you think it's been sufficiently discussed. And if you do, then we'll take the procedural vote to the motion. Motion to the vote.
I think we'll take it to the vote.
Okay, so you need to confirm.
So we're voting on a substantive motion by
Chair,
Councillor.
sorry, you did give me the grace to hold my speaking back till...
If you would.
Can I just
Sorry, yeah, if you do that first.
Procedural vote.
Procedural vote.
It's a procedural vote to move to the vote.
Yeah. So what we're voting.
If Councillor Stewart wanted to sum up, you can come back afterwards. We vote on this one first. We vote on the substantive motion. We're going to the procedural vote of Councillor Hastings' proposal.
Hang on, can you just check the rules in there?
procedural votes don't have named votes. Those for the motion?
So those in favour of going
In favour
to
of the motion, to vote. To vote now.
on the motion.
Raise your hands.
Is it just
Those in favour of
to be
voting
clear,
for the
members,
procedure.
yeah, this is a, yeah. You're not voting on the substantive, you're voting on the decision to move to the vote.
Yeah. You're voting on the decision to vote. Those for.
So, yes.
Yeah, please, yeah. Quick, quick. Those against? None. Any one against? Two. Any abstentions? No abstention. One abstention.
On the substantive.
Now we're voting on the substantive motion.
Which is this. Jen.
31 for, 2 against, and 1 abstention. 31 for. It's nearly finished. 2 minutes. Could we vote on the motion, please? Those in favour of, raise your hands.
The word is filibustering as a
Those
point of order, Chairman.
for the motion, please raise your hands. On the substantive motion.
The substantive motion as proposed by Councillor Hastings.
That's it.
Get your hands up.
On a point of order, Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Churchman, Councillor Hastings, Councillor Henry, Councillor Hobart, Councillor Mosdale, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk, Councillor Andre, Councillor Downer, Councillor Fuller, Councillor Howe, Councillor Medland, Councillor PC Wilcox, Councillor Stevens, Councillor Jones-Evans, Councillor Love, Councillor Lilly, Councillor Brodie, Councillor Barry, Councillor Garrett, Councillor Smart and Councillor Cameron. Against.
Those against?
Councillor Abraham, Councillor Hutchinson, Councillor Peace, Councillor Ward and Councillor Stewart and Councillor Whitehouse.
And any abstentions?
Councillor Beston, Councillor Brading, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Outlaw, Councillor Tyndall, Councillor Perks.
Thank you. We're ready for results for that. That was 23 for, 6 against, and 5 abstentions, and that motion carried. Councillor Stevens, 780. I just need to explain something to members. We've used up all our time for motions. So any motions left on the agenda will have to be dealt with at the next meeting if they come forward. We're moving straight to item 7, which is members' question time of leader. We've got 30 minutes for that. Thank you. Councillor Mosdale.
Having just sat through this evening and think that the debate that was meant to come up with regards to mental health is going to be rather skirted over and not discussed, I do think that it's within my gift to suggest or say that we will have a complete... I agree with Councillor Brodie, and that the Isle of Wight Council, through a joint meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board and Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny Committee, have a whole review of the mental health processes, so I don't want to miss the debate and the motions and stuff like that because we've run out of time. I think we should have a commitment to review those services, and as the Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, I'm quite happy to give that commitment to Councillor Brodie, Councillor Lilly and the rest of this chamber, that we will have that review and we'll make it a whole day-long review of those services.
Okay, questions to the leader.
Written questions.
One written question. We've got one written question.
Can I just say that I accept that with that?
One written question from Councillor Whitehouse, please.
Right.
Shall I read it here? To ask the leader if he will make a statement setting out the main achievements of this administration since it was formed 2 years ago. Please, Councillor.
Chair, thank you, and thank you, members, and actually thank you for what I've written down was an interesting debate earlier. I think it was interesting to watch how it played out. To answer the question of Councillor Whitehouse, I'm going to bullet point key things which I believe this administration has achieved in the last 2 years. The first being the sound financial basis on which we have set our budgets and set 3 budgets and are currently working on the forthcoming budget next year. Another success has been the decision to go into the rate retention pilot, which has with Portsmouth, which has raised for this council millions of pounds. Another success has been receiving £9.5 million for the infrastructure grant, which will enable us to at last tackle the congestion issue at St Mary's Roundabout. The grant funding that we have received to date for adult social care, without which we would not, I don't think, been able to deliver the service we have. The grant funding which we have received for the wet shelter, which I think anybody will now appreciate is a really, really positive way forward. The schools improvement that Councillor Brady particularly has been overseeing, and the Ofsted report that sits alongside that, which puts us at a very high position nationally in terms of the central children's services. Saving Sandown Bay Academy, which was against government policy but was accepted. The biosphere, which we haven't debated tonight, I am disappointed about that. I think that was a good motion and I hope that will come back. But that was an achievement, and all those involved I congratulate inside and outside the council. When anybody says we are getting recognised now for improved roads through the PFI. The coastal path planning that Councillor Hobart has been working at with officers and Natural England, the walkers amongst us will appreciate the work that's gone into that. The island plan review, as controversial as some may wish to make the housing numbers, the fact that we as a council have taken that on, something that is well overdue and should be done. The focus we're now putting on affordable housing, and we will see our first affordable housing being built by the end of this year. Creating our own council housing company, something we said we'd do, something people said we should do, and we've done it. The all-weather pitch at Cowes Enterprise College, which this council approved funding to support, is state-of-the-art and probably second to none other in the country. I would also say the Medina Bridge proposals, with the number of reactions I've had from people that recognise it's a good step forward. The investment we have put back in to our senior officer team, which is enabling us now to really start tackling some big issues, and we have a number of those officers here this evening, and I do thank them for that. The staff survey improvements, and they're not our decision, that's a reflection from the staff themselves who feel far more positive. Our media management and the way that we've taken on new staff to improve the way that we get our message out to the community. The award nominations of 5 different areas of this local authority at the National MJ Awards, and having gone along to that event, I didn't appreciate just how significant that was nationally. It puts this island in a really good stead. The e-newsletter that we now produce, and if members you're not onto it, it costs you nothing other than an email address,
it does provide some really good information. I would say, this has come from others, leadership and cabinet capability. And the lesson I've learned through the last 2 years is having a good cabinet enables us to get through some good work. The partnership with Hampshire, with our shared education and our public health, is now becoming something we're getting contacted about to find out how we've done things. Our town and parish council councillors, and I look across this chamber, and there are members here who not only give their time up for the Isle of Wight Council, you are sitting regularly on town and parish councils, and I acknowledge you for that. Although I'm not a member of one, I go to 2, and probably, if I'm lucky, next time round 3. It's important that we keep in touch with our community, and I think you all do a good job. The Combined Fire Authority, and I read that letter out this evening, that is an immense amount of work that's been done by officers. The County Hall, one-stop shop. We all walk in now, we come through that front door, and you speak to the people as I do that are using the service, and they are thinking it's a much improved place. The Forest Road Recycling Centre, which is coming up online in October, and actually has more benefits that are going to come out of it than I first realised in terms of the provision of energy elsewhere on this island. The strong links that we've formulated with government, and we have formulated some strong links. There are members in this chamber who have sat with and engaged with people that are in that cabinet today. Well, it's where, let's be honest, if we want to get something out of government, we have to engage. And so we've taken that path. Yeah. And I will say this, but I'm sure you'll all hold me to account, but I'm going to try and hold him. The fact that the now Prime Minister of this country has acknowledged that we should have an island deal, because he told me that in person at the husting. So I've got something I can go back and say, deliver on this, please. So I think these, for me, are collectively good achievements, and I hope in the next 2 years I'll be able to read you another list.
Chair, in thanking the Leader of the Council for that fulsome, if humble response when there was so much more he could say, would he perhaps join with me in accepting that the biggest achievement of his administration was the return of strategic vision and a can-do attitude and approach? For example, not just to regenerate Newport Harbour, but to rise to the challenge of the whole Medina Valley, to have transformed education and children's services when the previous administration, which collapsed overnight and ran away from its responsibilities, believed that no budget could be set, services couldn't be continued, and nothing was possible.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, it's a little bit like some of the climate debates. I think 2 years ago we had 6 months to save the island.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Smart, for question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if you, sir, and the other members sitting around here this evening are aware of how proud I am, in spite of everything that's been said in certain quarters, to be sitting here tonight. I am speaking as a very proud Corkhead, Newportonian, and someone who, yes, has been involved for more years than I expect I'd like to remember now, including one of my proudest members, and that was helping to progress the Homeless Persons Act through Parliament, which was done by the then Isle of Wight MP. And that's all I've got to say, except to say thank you all.
That's very good. Well, thank you, Shirley. Councillor Churchman, to finish off.
I'm sure the council would like to hear a little bit more good news. We have, as a council, been put forward for an award for our pension funds.
Can I call point of order, please? This is supposed to be a members' questions session, not an opportunity for speeches.
That's quite right. Councillor Churchman is withdrawing that. I will close the meeting. Thank you very much. Point of order. Councillor Whitehouse's question to Rosina.
It's written and all. The written questions, if they're submitted in time, are guaranteed a written response.
Written question is on page...
We'll provide it.
I can provide it to you now.
Yeah.
Okay, well noted. I'll close this meeting now. We will provide it. I'll close the meeting, thank you.